not the finger he gave us last time. So, hey, well, welcome to the Most High Show. My name is Christian, and today we have a good show. We have Trey here. He's going to be talking about how he went from suburban life to hardcore drug use. We're going to be talking about the opioid crisis on the Recovery Rundown. Leslie May is here. DJ May is here to talk about that with me. And all that is coming up here on this episode of The Most High Show.
Welcome to The Most High Show, a show about recovery, spirituality, and all that. Produced, posted, and hosted by people in recovery who have strength and hope and want to share it with you. If you or someone you love is suffering, we want you to know you are not alone. This is The Most High Show.
All right, so we're time for the Recovery Rundown. And every week we've been talking about the opioid crisis. And, you know, it's hard to gauge because I'm in this world of recovery and we're in this world of recovery. So we know a lot about this. But like my old boss, Steve Harvey, used to say, is you don't want to start telling the story in the second chapter. You want to get them to the cover of the book. So we're just assuming that this story hasn't been told enough because people are still dying at alarming rates. So this clip is going to give you a little background of how we got to this opioid crisis. Check it out.
Have you ever done OxyContin? First of all, congratulations for surviving. Also, congratulations because you helped support one of the most corrupt families in American history, the Sacklers. Never heard of them? Well, maybe you've heard of Purdue Pharma, no relation to the delicious Purdue chicken dynasty. The Sackler family are the majority shareholders of Purdue Pharma and were in charge of the company when OxyContin burst onto the scene in the 1990s.
This was arguably the beginning of the opioid crisis that endures today and has killed nearly 500,000 people. Now, there's an explosive new book from award-winning New York Post writer Patrick Radden Keefe. It chronicles the dark legacy of this billionaire clan. The book is called Empire of Pain: The Secret History of the Sackler Family. It is a gripping and shocking story of 3 generations of the Sackler family and their roles in the onslaught of Valium and OxyContin.
Although there are lawsuits pending all over the country accusing the family of culpability in this nightmare, they claim it wasn't their fault.
People close to the Sackler family point out that OxyContin's label always referred to the potential for addiction, and that the product, which is still on the market, has helped millions of people with chronic pain. In 2010, Purdue reformulated OxyContin to make it harder to abuse. Representatives of Sackler family members who served on Purdue's board in recent years say they acted ethically and lawfully. At a virtual congressional hearing in December, David and Kathy Sackler argued the family relied on Purdue management.
Let me conclude by saying this. What you have heard from the press about the Sacklers is almost certainly wrong and highly distorted.
I have to say, there is nothing that I can find that I would have done differently.
After nearly every state sued, Purdue filed for bankruptcy. A proposed settlement would put the company in a public trust, with all future profits going toward abatement of the opioid crisis. As part of the proposed deal, the Sacklers would pay more than $4 billion.
$4 billion is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. There's another way of looking at it, too, though, which is that it's not that much. They walk away with all the rest of the fortune that they've derived.
The Sackler family will likely object to much of what you write in this book.
I'm sure they will. Yeah, but part of what I wanted to do in the book
They will say it's inaccurate.
Yeah, they will. I think that, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of things you can buy if you're a billionaire. I think you can buy your own version of justice, but you cannot squander the truth. But you cannot stifle the truth.
It is worth noting, though, that no member of the Sackler family has been charged with a crime. Apparently, homicidal greed is not illegal in America.
All right. So that's a pretty good breakdown of the history of kind of how we got to this point of this opioid crisis. And a lot of people were tracing it back to this OxyContin getting out so heavily prescribed and easily prescribed that it got a lot of people opioid dependent. And then when they could no longer get the pills, when the laws and the rules kind of changed, people started turning to street heroin. And then with the introduction of fentanyl, that's where we get a lot of these overdoses.
When you say street heroin, is that the black market?
It's like black.
Or
Street heroin is like black tar heroin.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So what happens is people are getting the pills prescribed to them,
Right.
and then they become chemically dependent on the opioid. And then after, maybe they can't get the pills anymore, so they start buying the pills from people, but they're very expensive. So as their addiction kind of continues on, a lot of opioid users will tell you what they end up doing is just buying heroin from the street because it's much cheaper and they can buy it at a cheaper price.
Oh my God.
But then that just kind of, so then that was kind of how people were dealing with, because it's really hard to kick opiates. And that's how they were dealing with it. And then the heroin was then getting laced with fentanyl. And now the way it is people are just buying straight fentanyl.
Yeah, which is a more dangerous drug out there.
Very dangerous.
Yeah.
So do you think that they knew, like here's this family, right? The Sackler family, right? Which is kind of like the family that's kind of running the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that they knew how addictive the product that they were putting in the marketplace was?
I want to say yes, but then I want to say no too. Because I don't think they were taking it. So how would they know, right? And then the people who made the drug, right? I mean,
Well, they're the people who made it.
well, I mean, like the chemists, like they weren't the actual people who actually made the drug. So they could have said, they probably told them, hey, this is a pain drug, whatever, and it could actually relieve people from the pain, and so it's not. They could easily say it's not addictive, and they can just believe what they said because it makes money, right? So, and then, taking that responsibility because they were part of that, of just selling that opioid, even though that, I guess, I don't know when it started where people were noticing that it was addictive, right? They just kept on selling it, right?
Yeah.
That's,
You remember when I had my surgery
yeah,
back in LA, and I wasn't on OxyContin, I was on Vicodin.
right.
But at that point in time, they weren't like limiting the amount they would prescribe you. So I was able to get Vicodin for a very, very, very long time.
Yeah.
And then what I noticed is, I don't even know if the pain was that bad, but it was like a psycho thing. Like my brain was telling me the pain was bad and that I needed more of the medicine.
Wow.
Because once eventually they were like, we can't prescribe it to you anymore. And then I had to deal with the pain, and then it wasn't that bad, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that another family member who was addicted to OxyContin, I can tell like the effects of it, when he was on it for a long term, because he kept, there was just little effects of it. Well,
Like
a lot
what?
of effects, like repetitive
Repeating
stories,
Uh-huh.
and just, just out of it, you can just tell, just even talking to that person, you just kind of feel like he's not all there,
Yeah.
But yeah, to have that person, to see him in that kind of state, and then now being off of it, and you can see the difference
Right.
of how, that really affected him too. But yeah.
Yeah. So, I guess call to action, is just spreading awareness and making people understand that this opioid crisis, it is what it is. It's a crisis. And it's not getting, I don't think it's getting near the community or government support that it needs to get, because it's really a lot of people. And even the numbers that get reported, I think, are low.
Right.
And there was recently a new bill that got passed, and so it's like $30 million that's going to like needle exchanges, getting crack pipes out into the street, and doing these kind of things, which a lot of experts will say that's harm reduction. And so it's a means that they're saying, well, this is how we're fighting it. But I think more needs to be done. I don't think harm reduction is the only way to address this complex issue that we got going on in America.
Yeah, there's got to be a lot more to do. But, you know, there's a lot of programs out there, you know, that are doing the work and trying to fight this epidemic of drugs.
Yeah. What's funny about that, Leslie? People's lives are at stake and you're laughing at it?
I probably said that really.
It's all good.
I don't know why I said that, but yeah.
We ain't dead. So.
I'm just saying there's a lot of there's people out there that
doing
can
work,
help
good work.
and doing good work and really trying to fight the hardest, whether it's, you know, getting some sanitary stuff for for people, or giving them clothing, or whatever it is.
Or like the Restoration Rotary Narcan project that we're heading up here in Atlanta, getting Narcan out because, you know, you can't recover if you're dead.
Yeah, it takes a village. So every
effort.
town, every state, every country has some program out there, and you know, thank God for them.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're moving on now because we can't just stay stuck on this joyous topic of the opioid crisis. And coming up, we're going to have Trey here. He's sharing his story, how he went from living that suburban life to the hardcore drug life. Check it out coming up after these messages.
Why Most High Media? Because I don't have the answers. Other people do. And learning from the experiences, the stories, the perspectives, seeing people who've been through the darkest of circumstances and then have come out of it on the other side and have lived extremely exciting, fulfilling lives and tapped into a way of being and a way of living, but it's actually real and obtainable, that's why.
We packed up to tell the story of a young lady who lost her daughter.
So there's a extremely high correlation between suicide, mental illness, and substance abuse.
Come on the ground. Come on the ground. Sir.
I think as of this year, there's about 14 million people in America who have a co-occurring disorder, and a little more than 7% of them seek help for it.
You know, in my addiction, I felt like I was better off dead.
I'm here to talk about my daughter, Megan, who committed suicide when she was 28.
There's enough hope in the people that do recover to where I keep going and keep showing up at places where I'm needed.
Ain't no high like the most high. Ain't no high. Ain't no high like the most high. Ain't no high. Holla if you need some things like love and change. I'm not talking coins and things or diamond rings. Everybody wants some change, but don't nobody wanna do nothing till the pain they can't stomach. And they told me that I believed them, so I gave them to the. Everybody thought that I was tripping, saying that I be acting different. Ain't no high like the most high. Ain't no high like the most high. Ain't no high like the most high. Ain't no high. Ain't no high like the most high.
All right, we're live. We're back. We're back. And joining me is our guest today in the seat of service, David called it. I love that because that's what it is. You're here to share your experience, strength, and hope, and it's a seat of service. You're doing a service to the recovery community and anyone who loves an addict because they get to learn a little bit about this life that we live. So, everybody, welcome Trey to the Most High Show. Thank you very much for being here, bro.
Oh, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah. So why don't you tell me a little bit about what you do now? I know this is what very little I know. I know you like to snowboard.
Yeah.
I know that you've done a lot of work in the schools for prevention. I went and spoke years ago with you, which is a great experience. Thank you for inviting me. But what else? What's a day in the life of Trey like today?
Well, you know what? I start almost every day with a meeting.
Okay.
Almost every day. I have a local clubhouse. I hit a meeting almost every morning, and the phrase I use is I am woven into the fellowship, and that's what I credit A, my sobriety with, but B, some peace of mind, because it always holds me accountable.
Yeah.
It always holds me accountable. So,
yeah.
And then I'm kind of semi-retired. Because of COVID, I just started back speaking in schools again. And I've been a lifelong, really kind of a teacher. After I got sober, a few years after I got sober, I really got into my dream jobs. I was a tennis coach for 25 years. I got into the snow sports industry, and I still do that. That, too, got frozen out by COVID. No pun intended there. And so that's, limping along and starting back up. And we're hoping to be back and those are actually school programs also, the ski programs. And I play golf too. I play a lot of golf. And I do hit the slopes. I was skiing last week, and I'm going back out next week too. So.
Yeah.
But,
that's cool.
Again, back to, my day starts with a meeting almost every day.
That's great.
When I'm in town here anyway.
Yeah.
And
so you hit one of those dawn buster.
Well, 8 a.m.
Okay.
We call them the breakfast club.
Okay.
So.
Yeah.
A little.
Yeah, just move the mic up so we're making sure we're getting good audio.
Or I'll sit up straight.
Yeah, right.
So
semi-retired.
Yeah. Well, and kind of COVID induced.
Turn your volume down.
It's kind of COVID induced. But I've been blessed and to be able to be that way. But believe me, not working is not going to work for me.
Okay.
Because I found myself not being in a peaceful place because I didn't have. That's one of the reasons that I took a job in a treatment center last year for a few months, just to have some purpose, have something to do, because my businesses weren't doing anything. They weren't allowing me to come and talk to the kids in schools and so on and so forth. So, I'm in a good position to serve.
Yeah, right.
To serve. You know, I go to work in a treatment center without getting paid. Mm-hmm. I'm willing to do that. I hope nobody's going to try to hit me up for that kind of work, but can't keep it unless you give it away. That's the bottom line. So
well, that's awesome to be in a place of semi-retired, in a place of service, in a place where you're able to give back and participate in helping teens and people like that. By going to the schools and talking to the schools. You've been doing that for a while, right? I know.
Yeah, we started in 2014.
Okay.
I started speaking in schools. Yeah.
What was it that prompted you doing that kind of work?
Well, so it's kind of interesting. So I had this snow sports program in schools, and I was working my way out of the tennis industry. I hated teaching summer tennis camps because it's so hot here in Atlanta. And I had this database of kids that I got from my snow sports programs in schools. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, what can I do with these kids? Well, I came up with this outdoor adventure tour. And it developed, it was a big hit. I would be in a car for about 800 miles over 4 days with about 6 boys in my car. We had a couple girls in one camp, but it's kind of a day camp. I pick these kids up, take them out, whitewater rafting, hiking, fishing, zip lining, all this stuff. And the kids would be like looking at billboards that had booze on them or something, or they'd be talking about, oh, my big brother got caught with weed or something like that, right? And, I kind of had some things I wanted to share with them.
Yeah.
But, their parents weren't paying me to tell them that I was a drug addict and an alcoholic. Right. And quite frankly, they didn't know I was either, right? And so at the end of that summer, and that was 14, that was like August or September of 14, I started looking into, what can I do? How can I reach some kids? How can I talk to kids? Can I make a little money doing it? What's the deal, And so I had these connections in high school PE departments, which also happened to be the health departments, PE and health.
Right.
And I reached out, made a couple of, I was connected in about 9 schools at the time with the ski program, and got it, and then just started blasting emails.
Yeah.
And started kind of putting together a program, started watching other prevention work programs on YouTube videos and things like that, get some ideas, and just started building a program together. And the first year I spoke solo, and then the second year I started bringing in guest people to try to get like a variety of people, like, a tagger from California or, the nerd or the jock or, just different people that more kids could identify with if they're telling their startup story. Because that's how we kind of approach the prevention thing is, hey, I was just doing what my friends were doing, and so the decision-making process, which is actually something they've started teaching in the schools, but when somebody who made the bad decision can express how they made the decision and why they made the decision to pick up in the first place, it's pretty impactful. So that's how that whole thing got started.
Well, and one of the ways I like how you do it is it's not a big assembly.
Right.
You're going into the health class, so you have the smaller kind of audience. They're able to engage, ask some questions, and so I feel like that's giving you an opportunity to really reach some people. And because it's a lot of those prevention things are big, production kind of things. Yeah,
I've been invited. I don't like them.
Yeah,
because the kids can be doing whatever on their phones, all that kind of stuff. The classroom thing is good. And I tell you, a neat little thing that, and I'm not sure if we were doing this when you joined me once or twice. One day I left a program or did a program, and the next day the teacher said something like, "Hey, you're going to come by and get these letters." And I was like, "Letters? What are you talking about?" And she goes, "Oh, well, I had all the kids write you a letter, after it was over." And so I kind of had this thing was, we're trying to help kids make better decisions, and then we're trying to provide service work for us, okay, the recovering community, because that's a big part of the deal. And, at the time I didn't think about it, but I think about it today as like a two-legged stool. And what happened was we had kids that were asking for help.
Oh.
And so not that we're interventionalists, but we could refer the kids to, a website or suggest they go to your counselor at school, maybe get some more suggestions. And so we actually gave the kids a chance. And we literally had kids say, well, everything from, "Oh, I'm glad I'm going to stop doing what I'm doing now." We know how that usually works out. But they're become aware.
Yeah.
And they're willing to share. Like, we were talking about something earlier today. They were actually willing to share with somebody that, they're concerned about what they're doing and they need to stop. They want to stop doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then so, like I said, we have lines we can't cross.
Right.
So, just send them a link to a website. So it started out as paper, and then they type an email, and that became part of the assignment for the class. The kids were required to do that. So that was really cool. And that was a God thing, man. I didn't, the teacher just came, so she said we did it with another program that the kids had to do a response letter. And so, I immediately adapted it because in that first pile of letters, I had 3 kids asking for help.
Yeah. So I'm imagining you the first time you get those letters, kind of tears bawling, like kind of to see the feedback of the impact that this service that you're doing was having on other people.
Well, it was whoa. I remember spreading them out on the because they were handwritten initially, spreading them out on the floor and going, "My goodness, look at this."
Yeah. That's awesome.
And it was really cool. It's real rewarding. I'm so glad to be getting back in classrooms again.
Yeah. Well, and it wasn't always service work and giving back and helping others and leading people down the right path. So when you start and you share your story, where do you usually start? And so that we can get an idea about what happened before.
Right. Yeah. Well, when I share in the recovering community, I usually share like how I got introduced to recovery and the solution. You know, it was a dark, dismal Thursday. No,
Right.
no, but it was a pretty dark day. But it was the 5th of the month. It was the last day rent was due. It was January, and I knocked on the door of my dad's office, and you know, because I needed some help, and the fact of the matter is, I really needed help with rent, despite the fact that at the time I had the best job I'd had in my entire life. I had, you know, my rent was probably $775. I'd probably, now this was a long time ago, but, you know, I'd probably made $7,000 the previous 5 weeks, and I didn't have $700 to pay my rent,
Right.
you know, because I drank, smoked, snorted, shot up, all of it.
Yeah.
I weighed about 135 pounds. That's about 90 pounds less than I weigh today.
Okay.
I wish it was about 60, but you know, it's
Right.
another topic. But anyway, talked to my dad, you know, I told him, you know, oh, I did a little, you know, my dad had no idea, and still, you know, he passed a couple years ago, but he still doesn't know how I used. But, you know, I told him, you know, I used, and he didn't know how much money I made either. He was an accountant. You know, when I started making money, I didn't let him know how much money, because a lot of the money was off the books. And, but he called a family doctor. I had a sister that had been in some trouble, and he called a family doctor, and the family doctor, you know, recommended a 12-step program, you know, and the drug that was, you know, taking me down to my knees literally and figuratively was cocaine, and I was smoking a lot of cocaine, and like I said, I was a real sick puppy, so, you know, I said, now it's the 5th. I was probably 48 hours detox, maybe. But, and I was done, which I had been done like many times before. Never again. And, so, you know, part of me at the time, I was like wanting to go to treatment. I'd heard a little bit about it at that time, but part of me, I was really there for the rent, because otherwise I was going to lose my apartment. You know? And, so I agreed to go to this meeting, and, you know, I joked that it was kind of a bargain. Yeah. Are you going to write the rent check? Yeah, I'll go.
Right.
And, but the cool part of the story is I went to the meeting, and I found a whole bunch of people that were just like me.
Yeah.
And I believed them a little bit. And you know, I heard the classics. You know, you never have to feel this way again. You know, and come back. Well, I had to work the next night. I did come back a couple of days later. I went to a meeting a couple of nights later, but, and then kind of on the way out the door, you know, I heard, you know, don't smoke any weed and don't drink. And I'm like, what? I thought this was, I thought this was about cocaine. They were like,
right.
No, you're an addict. Are you an addict? Yeah. And like, you can't be doing that stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And, so I gave it a go for about 17 days, 8 hours, and 22 minutes, but who was counting, you know?
You were.
Yeah. And I went to I probably went to 4 meetings in 3 weeks or something, you know, and then smoked some weed, which I stared at for hours before I got high. And then I was drinking by the weekend. And then I actually stayed away from the hard stuff for probably about 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, I built up a big stack of money at home too, and then I set up some days off and went on a bender. Lost that job, which may have saved my life.
Right.
But anyway, that was you know, my first introduction to the solution.
Yeah.
You know, and so some months later, that's, you know, I knew I needed to go back, and I went back and started to weave myself. Put 2 feet in.
Yeah.
Started to weave myself in.
Yeah. So that first meeting, did your dad go with you, or was it just you?
No, I just went.
So what's the feeling? Can you recall that feeling of walking into the meeting? This is your first meeting ever.
Right.
You know, you really just need the rent.
Right.
But you also kind of know on some level you need more than just the rent. You need something, a life change.
Right.
Do you remember the feeling you had when you walked in?
When I walked in, no, but I was kind of stoked about it. and I went back and to the restaurant where I worked, and I put some literature on the bulletin boards, and stuff like that, because we were all a mess, So I was kind of, gung ho for a minute,
You were hopeful.
I was, and again, I think it was the most important day of my entire life. I mean, I really, really do. Because if I wasn't, I mean, I guess I stumble in somehow, some way, some other time, but I knew where to go 7 months later.
Right. That's key. Right.
Yes.
And I think that's the thing about the rooms and the fellowships is that, it's really like the safest place to go because they're going to give you the love and encouragement. But, it's kind of on you to do what you do when you leave there, right? But those doors are always going to be open for you to return, and you just weren't at a point at that day. You tried, but you didn't feel any kind of shame or guilt to go back into that room. No experience you had up to that point made you feel like, oh, if I go back, I'm kind of proving them right, or did you?
No, not really. As I look back on it today, I just wasn't quite ready.
Yeah.
I had, the classic, what's the word I'm looking for? I want to say alibi. It's not alibi. Reservation.
Yeah.
I'd smoked pot for 11, 12 years every single day.
Right.
I couldn't see myself not drawing a bong hit. I just,
right.
Yeah. On the beach in Jamaica or in the mountain, I just couldn't see that, and I didn't, and of course I didn't get a lot of information of the entirety of my disease,
right.
In one meeting.
Yeah. You can move the mic.
Okay.
You don't have to move up, but you can just there you go. Yeah.
Right.
And that's interesting because you think about something like cocaine, right, and how addictive and I was gonna say amazing because if you've ever tried it, but it's so extreme, right? It's so euphoric. It's kind of like takes you off the planet in a sense, right? And then you think of weed is kind of like a milder. A lot of people say it's not. It's kind of not as harmful, right? But the thing that really kept you tethered to an addictive lifestyle was the weed, not necessarily the cocaine, right?
Well, yeah, probably, yeah. Well, because the result was, I always went back. It was never enough.
Right.
It didn't work like it did when I smoked it for the first time at 16 years old or whatever.
Right.
More.
Yeah.
More.
Yeah. Well,
number.
Weed has there's a physical and then there's also a psychological thing, addictively, right? That in order to quit that, you're getting over kind of two hurdles, right? Because it does such a mind state. So to get to this point, right, where you're thinking you need help and you can't pay rent, do you want to take us back a little bit about kind of like what led you to that place?
Sure. I grew up in Metro Atlanta in the suburbs and Dunwoody, or we called it Funwoody back then, okay. And I took my first drink at 12, but I didn't really consume any. I just acted like I was buzzed, doing what my friends were doing. I kind of got in with the in crowd starting that. Actually shied away from alcohol. Even though that I would have beers at the high school parties all through, I watched people get drunk, pass out, puke, and then claim they didn't know what happened. And none of that appealed to me. So, I would pour my beer in a plant and just do crazy stuff because I was supposed to be buzzed, but I didn't like the way it tasted, kind of shied away from it. It's the 70s and the appearance there was, only like hippies did drugs. But then as I'm going through my high school years, there were a lot of guys that were getting high that were, in advanced academics, athletes, clean cut American kids in, suburban Atlanta that were getting high and just like me. And, they didn't appear to be, losing their marbles or,
right.
Of course, I didn't see the report cards, you know. You know, so eventually, it was the same thing with weed. I'm hanging out with people who are getting high. Eventually, give me some of that. First time I did it, didn't get high, but I acted as if. And now, I was part of the party crowd before, the Red Solo Cup crowd at the high school parties, and then I'm part of they called it cool crowd, and those intersected, and now I'm part of the crowd. I've never really been high. And then my junior year in high school, I got high for the first time, and it was magic. I was always short, and I grew 5 inches in height after high school.
Okay, wow.
And so I had lots of girl space friends, but I never would ask girls out because I thought they were all taller than me. But I got high, and the next thing I knew, I could ask a girl out, and wound up with a prom date, and and just like so late my junior year in high school, start buying weed first time. Start getting high by myself. Why? Because I'm bored, nothing else to do, really. I remember thinking or hearing like, "Oh, drugs are all an escape," and they were just fun.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so anyway, I started making decisions based on getting high. Like I decided where I was going to go to school based on it was a party school, instead of going to a smaller school where I could get a tennis scholarship. And
so you were playing sports, tennis during this your high school
I was
years.
football and baseball until everybody grew and I didn't.
Okay.
And then I went. I was a tennis player.
So did the weed smoking in high school affect your tennis playing?
Well, it did by that summer before my senior year. Okay. Well, so late my junior year, I decided I'm not going to continue really playing the tournaments and go for the scholarship. So I'm not going to academy 3 days a week and a private lesson, and I'm not going to play that summer schedule between my junior year and senior year in high school.
How much of that was because you were smoking weed?
Oh, because I decided I wasn't going to go for a scholarship. So I didn't have to train and work and all that,
Yeah.
And I got to keep my job, which means I get money, which means I can buy some weed. So that summer before my senior year, I got a job, driving. A friend of mine comes in out of town. He had a grandmother who spoiled him, so he always had money. And that summer before my senior year, it was every day, which before it was really just weekends, And that summer before my senior year, and then my senior year in high school, I was hanging out with a completely different crowd than I was this previous year. My senior year, most of them actually were athletes, a lot of football players, and we were getting high every day before school. And the only reason I didn't get high, my senior year in high school is because we couldn't find any weed. Not because there was a math test or an essay to write in English. And we would go to great lengths. We'd drive to Athens. We'd drive to Augusta. Oh, my uncle's in Birmingham. We'll go get some weed from him. And drive 3 hours and come back with a joint. It's like, what? We waited for this?
Right.
Or the guy never came back with our money, right? That kind of thing,
Yeah.
So, but I had already gotten into school. And so I did manage to barely graduate. And my last report card came in, and my parents had a little sit down with me, and they were like, "What's this?" And I don't think they'd seen the previous report card because I recently saw it. It was bad too, but it was basically all D's, and which was passing. And I think really the only class I only had 4 classes that year. I think the only class I needed to pass was English. But they had a little sit down with me and said, "What's going on?" And my parents were very naive about weed. Now keep in mind, I was always late for curfew. They would always be there. And both my grandfathers were alcoholics. So my parents were looking for me to come home and smell like liquor and be drunk. And I wasn't.
Right.
And they were cigarette smokers. Not good for your sense of smell. So they couldn't smell weed on me either. So, they just thought I was stupid for being late for curfew all the time or whatever. And, but anyway, I said, "Oh, it's all good. I had senioritis, I was just cutting up, and I pointed to all my good grades before, my SAT scores, and my dad went to Athens. It's all going to be good. It's all going to be great. And they're like, okay, I guess we're going to have to see what happens, And I do like to tell the story about the first time I got drunk, because I went to this. I'd never really been drunk, and I went to this party. This was a couple weeks before everybody's going off to college, kind of into the summer neighborhood thing, and I get there and I'm baked because I'm always high, but this guy gives me a bottle of liquor. He says, "You're gonna love this stuff. It tastes like candy, and I drank like a lot of it, like 3/4 of a bottle, and I was trashed, and like never before, or like alcohol just. And I had to push, this is embarrassing, I had to push the scooter home that I got for graduation. Not the stereo that I wanted, but the scooter that went.
We're talking about like a motor scooter.
Yeah, like a Honda Express. It went
Not like a little
27 miles an hour.
Razor.
No.
Okay,
It went like 27 miles an hour top speed though.
Okay.
But anywho, and you had to wear a helmet too. It was really bad. But anyway, so I had to push the scooter home because I was just trashed. And the last thing I remember was the silhouette of my parents in my bedroom door. And I'm sure they were shaking their head like, oh, well, it's finally happened, you know. And the next thing I remember, you know, and this is the first time I really got drunk and I blacked out. And but the next thing I remember was waking up in my bed full of vomit, you know. And this was my first brush with death. Because, you know, my parents rolled me over. I was on my back, you know, vomit in my mouth. And, you know, they rolled me over thinking I'm going to learn some sort of lesson. And, you know, temporary as it was, I guess I did for a couple of days or whatever. But, but you know, I could have, if my parents aren't home that night, I'm on my back, you know, I'm on my back choking on my sputum.
Yeah.
You know, like Jimi Hendrix did, you know, things like that. So, so I go off to school and it didn't go well.
Yeah.
I learned to drink, you know, that real sweet liquor, you drink little bits of it.
So during these high school, right, and you're kind of slowly getting into weed and then you drink. Did you have kind of that quintessential thing that a lot of people in recovery have, right? Where they felt alone, they felt separated from people, they felt like they never really fit in, right? Do you feel like you had that? Because it sounds like the way you're telling the story it was more like you were this was an additive to a pretty good life already, and you were just kind of having fun.
Well, it was a good life, but no, the spot for me, I mentioned a second ago, was my height. I always felt insecure about my nickname was Little Man all through high school. Okay. Yeah. You know, every girl that wrote in my high school annual, Little Man, you know? Yeah. And so you know, I was 6 foot tall and bulletproof when I got high. And so it took away that angst. Now, I didn't have both my parents came from alcoholic households. There wasn't really alcoholic drinking going on in my house, but there was a lot of alcoholism. There was a lot of the symptoms, you know, anger and, you know, I mean, it was a real classic, you know, children of alcoholic household, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, my parents fought a whole lot. It was pretty chaotic. So I was I never brought friends to my house because I was insecure. You know, I was insecure about, you know, how the house looked or how my parents were going to behave. And just, you know, that feeling that you kind of describe a lot of people, for me, I call it natural teenage angst. Now, I didn't really identify it, but when I got high, it went away. Yeah. And I liked it being away. Yeah. So naturally, when it went away and I have a solution to, you know, it comes back, I have a solution to make it go away again. Right. I'm going to do it again. Yeah. I'm bored. I'm by myself. I don't know if I should call this girl on the phone or not. But I've got some weed in my car. I can get high. And then, you know. Yeah. So it was the solution. Yeah. To and I, you know, and again, some people have a much more difficult, you know, trauma and angst and things like that. But I think everybody starts with some teenage angst or, you know, the human condition is one of disconnection, you know, and I kind of associate it with that. I call my own just natural teenage angst. But
So you get into college and I imagine things ramp up in the college life.
Oh yeah. More drugs, you know. You know, get introduced to methamphetamines. Oh, you stay up all night the night before finals, and you'll ace the final, and then you can, you know, stay in school, and nothing like that happened. You know, I just got wired out of my mind and walked out of the final before it was over. Right. You know, because I couldn't cope. So I came home with my tail between my legs, and you know, an embarrassment to myself, my family, all that kind of stuff. And you know, I kept. You know, there was one moment where I'd convinced my parents to let me stay for another semester, and I wrote on my dorm room wall, only party on the weekends, you know. And eventually, you know, I had to put a poster over it because I couldn't get it off because my friends were in there, were getting high, and they're like, hey, dude, it's Tuesday, it's Wednesday, you know. We're getting high, what are you doing, you know? And so those were my first efforts, though, to curb. See, I always thought, you know, literally 7 years later, when I'm, you know, freebasing cocaine or sticking needles in my arms, that was really when I crossed the line. But, learning about the disease, back then I was trying to control it.
Right.
And I couldn't.
Yeah.
And it was only weed. That's what I talk to a lot of kids about today too, because they all think, oh, weed's not so bad. After all, it's legal in so many states and all that kind of stuff. And well, it didn't work out for me. I couldn't stop myself from getting high. I could not get high.
Yeah. So when do the hard drugs begin to, I don't want to fast forward you past anything significant, but when do you start turning to the hard drugs?
Well, so I come home, staying with my folks, try the community college thing a little bit. I start working. I'd worked in a restaurant and a hotel before I went off to college. And so I start working in restaurants and bars. And eventually there, it's like, I'd already done speed and dropped acid and done mushrooms. And eventually, I get introduced to cocaine. I'm living with my folks and, you don't exactly do cocaine and go home and go to bed at 1 o'clock at night. You don't come home. And, eventually my dad's like, you can't stay here. You don't come home for days and all that kind of thing. And, there was a period where I was enrolled in school, but I would enroll in school and then withdraw and then write a check for the refund. Well, my dad and I share the same name. And so I'm living with my parents. I leave their house at 7:30 in the morning. They think I'm going to class. I'm not going to class. It's time I was going to get high, go to the bowling alley, play video games, hang out for a while, and go back home and pretend like I've been at school and just stealing. Yeah. Just outright stealing from my folks,
Right.
And like I said, eventually, Dad's like, you can't stay here, because I wouldn't come home.
Right.
And and then, eventually, I'm working in nightclub, later and later at night, after hours. Eventually I get introduced to smoking cocaine, freebasing cocaine. And then eventually the same guy that introduced me to that introduced me to the needle. I wasn't really into it. It was a few times where I shot up, but and it just spiraled. And I met a girl. So it's a classic if then.
Okay.
I met a girl that I thought, I always thought the right job, the right girl, the right car, the right house, even the right city might make a change. So I meet a girl, and I think I could marry that girl. And I'll stop doing this stuff. I'll get this thing together, right? And so I hooked up with this girl, and I took her hostage, and great girl and all, and a fool for being with somebody like me. But I was playing the big shot, dealing with little drugs or whatever. But anyway, so eventually, I'm still staying up for days and not going to work where we met. And because I got out of the nightclub business and I went to work at a country club, I thought that'd be better. No, the liquor pours free there.
Right.
They don't count the liquor there. You could just drink. So I never really drank on the job before. I started drinking on the job, and everybody liked to do cocaine there too. And so it's not getting any better. So we had this grand idea to get out of Atlanta. And so I didn't do hard drugs for about, 16 months maybe.
Okay.
And but I drank like I'd never drank before.
Yeah.
And I smoked weed,
right,
like I always had, constantly.
Well, you had gotten accustomed to turning off that voice in your head, and you were kind of an autopilot or kind of sleepwalking really through life at that point.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. I mean, it was work to use and use to work.
Right.
I mean, hit the bong before I got my feet out of the bed in the morning.
Right.
And then, that wasn't enough. So I'm drinking hard liquor to pass out at night.
Right.
And eventually we wind up back in Atlanta. It's the whole cycle all over again.
Kicks right up.
Oh yeah. I get right involved with the same people, and, and it just got ugly. And I actually ditched the girl. So I got a ring on her finger now. We're planning a wedding. She's taking a job with Delta Airlines. So, marry me and fly free, right? So we're going to fly all over the world and all this kind of stuff. And so she started, traveling. She'd leave for 3 days at a time. She'd come home and like half our money's gone.
Right.
And so I was dealing with a lot of guilt. I mean, it was just the worst thing in the world was having to face her when she came in.
Right.
You know, and so I had this deer rifle that, I put it in my mouth. I mean, I contemplated suicide, and the only reason I didn't do it was, and I think I attribute this I think this is the only time I ever thought about anybody else. I thought about her finding me.
Right.
I just couldn't do it. I just didn't want to do that to her. That was probably a little chicken too, but I just didn't want her to do it because all the money was gone, all the dope was gone, and here I was again in the same place I'd been over and over again. And gonna have to say I'm not gonna do it again. I'm not gonna do it, and it just wasn't flying. So
and that's hell on earth. That's the in the pit, in the middle of addiction. It's hell on earth.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then eventually what happens is because she would only travel like 6 days a month, 9 days a month, and it's on inside me. Are you on call? Are you going to Europe for 3 days?
Right.
I mean, constantly. And my solution to that problem was get rid of her.
Yeah.
So I could use the way I wanted to use.
Wow.
And about that same time, well, actually shortly after I broke it off with her, a couple things happened. First of all, I had this little plan, so I broke it off with her, and then I said, "Hey, I need to get that engagement ring back." It was my grandma or my great aunt's. I can't remember whose it was, and she's like, "Oh no! I had lunch with your mother yesterday. Your mom's got the engagement ring," because I had big plans for that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was selling that for sure.
Right.
And then another thing happened, and I still don't remember exactly how this happened. I don't know if I made the decision or my dad called me and God had intervened, but my dad asked for that rifle back. And I remember being relieved that it was no longer in that apartment.
Yeah.
Because she wasn't going to be there.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to have to, it was just going to be some random apartment manager or cop that found me if I decided to do that.
So it sounds like she loved you.
Yeah. I mean,
enough to talk to your parents and maybe let them know what was going on, and they
she
intervened.
didn't let them know what was going on. She just made sure they got that ring back.
Maybe
my parents really never knew the extent of it.
Yeah,
they knew cocaine was involved. They had no idea really
the extent
of it. But,
yeah. Well, what we're gonna do?
To my knowledge.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna take a break.
Okay.
We're gonna play a clip from Montana Society, and then we're gonna pick up kind of where we're at, and then you've been in this recovery life for a while, and I'm sure you've learned some things, and I'd love to get into the intricacies of what that's like.
Oh yeah,
because I think it's important that we cover that, because that is what our life is like today. So
cool beans.
All right,
great.
Montana Society, an inspiring docuseries about a group of addicts who endeavor to repurpose an underground nuclear bunker in Paradise Valley, Montana. Along the way, they learn to work together under the wild leadership of Dean, a financial guru and outdoorsman who has his money on the line. In the end, will they learn to repurpose their pain and the bunker into something new and wonderful? Find out on this season of the Montana Society.
All right, we're back. We're gonna pick up on this, the epic adventures of Trey. So, this relationship that you're in, that you basically sacrificed to continue using. How long from that point to when you decide to commit to a new way of life in recovery?
All right. Well, about 8 months after I broke it off with her, shortly after I broke it off with her, I got this really good job. I started making a lot of money, which basically just meant I get to use a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
And about 8 months after that was that fateful January day where I was introduced to 12-step programs for that phone call from my dad and this doctor and so on and so forth. And as I mentioned earlier, 18 days, 6 hours, 22 minutes, and but in July of that year, I actually called that old girlfriend of mine and said, I'm a mess. Will you go with me to my parents' house? And she did. I really hadn't been talking to her at all. I mean, it was done, and but she went with me, and I went and told my dad, I did it again, or whatever, and just kind of started over. And I went to one of the meetings that I had gone to before, and this was, and I was actually sharing about this in a meeting this morning. I went to, and I don't know if it was my first one back or my second one, but I had a couple of days under my belt, and I go to this meeting, and there's a guy in there that I went to high school with. And at the end of the meetings, they would do announcements for birthdays, for sobriety birthdays, and they announced that he was going to have like 3 or 4 years. And my first response was, "There is no effing way." And we were like, "Hey, what's going on?" I mean, he was in my neighborhood, and we went to high school together, and probably a couple of years of elementary school together. I don't remember exactly, but and he kind of took me under his wing or whatever. We went out, did coffee or lunch or whatever, and he had a boat. We went out on the lake one day, and just hanging out with him a couple of times, I came to believe that it was real.
Wow.
And because I knew him, I had liked the people that I had met in the rooms, and a couple phone numbers I had or whatever, but I didn't know them. And I knew this guy. And of course, I didn't believe it at first, but then hanging out with him a few times, I realized it was sincere.
Yeah.
And that was hopeful.
Wow.
And so I'm unemployed. I think I'd lost a job. I can't remember exactly, but I start cutting my. I think my dad had to pay the rent again for July. Start cutting my dad's lawn and stuff like that, and I get a job, and start. It was actually, I was in the nightclub business, and they weren't open yet, and they were not going to open for a while. So I worked during the day, hiring people and menus and the construction and doing all this stuff, and it was my dream job. I'd always thought that's what I wanted, be involved in a cool club. And this was like a jazz supper club. It was going to be all upscale and classy and all this stuff down in Buckhead, and so I just thought this was cool. Now I told the upper guys that hired me, I said, "Oh yeah, I got in the program in January, even though I only had about 2 weeks, right?"
Yeah.
So, but I get my dream job, and I'm going to meetings every night, and because that fellowship really only had meetings at night, and but then we opened in probably middle of August, and so for a few weeks I didn't go to a meeting except maybe on Sunday or Monday night, and I wound up getting loaded on like. Actually, it was Labor Day morning. I actually picked up a 60-day chip on a Sunday night. The next day was Labor Day, and I wound up using. And so for about 3 weeks, I'd use like once a week. I think I smoked pot once. I drank once. I did a little bit of coke once, and then I just I was at work I usually didn't work on Mondays. But I was at work on Monday night in Buckhead, and I just said, I have to go. And I knew there was a meeting at a church minutes from the club.
Yeah.
And I went and I picked up a white chip, and that was the last white chip I picked up.
Wow. What year was that?
September 26, 1989.
Oh, 89.
Yeah. So
yeah. So that's a few 24 hours.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's unbelievable to think that it's real. I mean, it really is.
Right.
I mean, and parts of it seems like it was that long ago, and parts of it doesn't.
Yeah.
Sometimes it seems like yesterday.
Right.
So, but the key for me, and I used this earlier, is that I got connected with people in the rooms.
Yeah.
And, part of it was I did get in a relationship early on, which I don't recommend. It brought me 2 wonderful kids, but it also brought me a divorce like 9 years after I first got sober,
Right.
But, she had significant sobriety. She hung out with a whole bunch of people who had sobriety, and they were doing the deal. So, for me, I'm more of a follower. If you tell me what to do, I'm not going to do it. But if I see people doing something that's getting them results, I followed. So
Yeah.
I started doing what those guys did, which
So-
eventually getting a sponsor,
Right, that's what I was gonna
hitting
get
my
to.
knees, doing some step work,
Yeah.
and things along those lines.
So do you recall that first journey through the steps? Was there any significant moments of freedom that you had?
I think really one of the most early on, I think a couple of the most significant things were, I heard people talking about asking God to help them stay sober for a day. Okay. And I would say, those couple of times that I used in September of that year, I had already done that, by the way, when I put that 60 days together. I would say I had been relieved of the obsession. But when I got high a couple of times, I made a decision to do so. I wasn't driven by, that, definitely wasn't physical, but I wasn't driven by the obsession. I just decided I wanted to. And so I think I was relieved of the obsession before I actually got sober.
Yeah.
And so then when I got my first sponsor, and I think reading the third step prayer and hitting my knees with him the first time, I think that was a huge game changer.
Wow, yeah.
Because I'd never done anything like that with anybody. And also, this guy was so cool. I asked him to be my sponsor because I just thought he was so cool, right?
Right.
And when he did that with me, it showed me humility in him. Not that I was shopping for humility. I just thought he was cool. I want to be like him, right?
Right.
And so that was huge. That was huge. And then so I get in this relationship, and my meetings are only at night, and I work at night, right? And so the birthplace of all the fellowships meets all the time and has meetings at clubhouses, all times of the day. And so my girlfriend at the time, later became my wife, she says to me, well, why don't you go to, Fellowship A, and, you could go to a meeting right before you go to work, because I went to work at 7 o'clock at night. And so I started going to this clubhouse in Buckhead, and a 5:30 meeting every night, Tuesday through Friday night, and that was a game changer. Because we were in the literature a couple of days a week. We were in the big book one day. Very similar to the format. I believe is pretty similar to the format that I have in the Breakfast Club, the meeting I go to. Is we're in the big book one day, we're in the 12 and 12 another day, and we have a couple of days of open discussion.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of step study, big book study right there. And again, I'm hearing how other people are getting this stuff and how it applies to them, and I'm identifying and I start, getting a grip on it.
Yeah.
And, but I did a 4-step, a real thorough 4-step about 5 years in.
Oh.
Yeah. I did some work with my first sponsor, and he kind of gave me a pass, I think. But when things were difficult, in my marriage and stuff, and I didn't like my behavior and my response to life on life's terms, I had a new sponsor at the time, and we got down and dirty, and that was where a lot of freedom came.
Yeah. Do you think, like, in having those couple years and maybe realizing, it's not the drugs and alcohol that were the issue, it's me, I'm the issue, and kind of forced into a place of humility, I need to clean up the wreckage of my past.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and as far as the record, I didn't have a huge amends list, because it's really my folks.
Right.
And that girlfriend, which you really don't go there, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so that was kind of the easy part. It was like, I got busy when I got sober. I went back to college. I started a business. I got married. I had kids.
Right.
I got real busy with that stuff. And then when that house of cards came tumbling down, that's when I had to get down and dirty.
Yeah.
And really look at more me, because I just really replaced, getting loaded with doing life the way the world tells us we need to do life.
Yeah, keeping up with the Joneses.
Right. But I had my accountability. I had, I went to meetings. I had my home groups. I had a sponsor that taught me through stuff. But it was when my marriage ended that I really had to look more at my responsibility of things. Because the way my marriage ended, it was really easy to point the finger at my wife, you know, and her behavior. And, you know, I had a sponsor just cut me off right there and tell me, you know, it doesn't matter. You know, you're 100% responsible of your part.
Yeah.
Let's say your part's only 5%.
Well,
you're 100% responsible for all that. You can't be concerning yourself with the other party.
Yeah.
You know, and I got to a place, a really painful place. And my sponsor was actually in the ministry, and my sponsor was actually my nightclub manager about 4 years before I got sober. He was a manager in a nightclub where I was a bartender.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but he was in the ministry at this time, full time. And so, you know, and he was, you know, he would take us to, he would invite us to church and stuff like that. And, you know, lead me to water, you know, and eventually the pain was bad. I was like, so what's in this water? You know what I mean? What's this about? You know? And, you know, he asked me, hey, just pick up the Bible and read John. Just read John. You know, and we started having discussions, and, you know, shortly thereafter, you know, about the time, my marriage ended. Well, my wife had left, and, you know, the divorce was a little while later. But you know, I accepted Christ as my Savior, and and along the same lines, what was kind of interesting there was I started seeing a counselor. I went to this like divorce recovery thing at a church. It was actually at his church, and I met a counselor, and I went and started seeing this counselor, and I just recently accepted Christ, and we started talking and stuff, and what I found was I had some stuff with my dad. You know, my dad was a, you know, son of an alcoholic, you know, no real program, no real, and he was an achiever. He was an accountant, successful practice, you know, that kind of guy. And I always had, you know, especially when my marriage ended, and that's kind of how we got there, is I felt like I had failed. You know, I had gotten sober, I'd gone to school, gotten a degree, started a business,
done everything right,
and then the marriage falls apart. You know, and so I feel like a failure. And this counselor started talking to me about, you know, this Father in heaven. I hope I can do this without getting choked up. That loved me perfectly. You know. My earthly father is just a human guy like me that has all the stuff that, you know, influenced his life. And, you know, in his heart of hearts, you know, he loved me the best he could. But outwardly, he still has all his baggage, if you will, influencing him. And then so, and that's kind of where I started, you know, to understand about grace and forgiveness. And I mentioned to you before, you know, I didn't really understand what happened in the garden or what happened on the cross for me. You know, and that was huge. Peace. And that's where when my life's, you know, going left and right today, or tripping in the future, or thinking about the past, I can reel it back into the grace of today. You know, so that's a big part of it right there.
Absolutely. So and receiving that is kind of a daily, which I think leads to that third step prayer, right? I mean, like when you're putting yourself in the third step prayer, to offering yourself to God, right? To and asking God to guide you and lead you, surrendering your will to God. And now you have at this point, you kind of get this new understanding of what it is that you're surrendering to. This thing that is loving you gently and kind. And I think it's Chip Ingram says that if there's a more gentler or softer way for you to be going through something, you'd be going through it in that way. Right. And so here's this creator, this divine thing that's loving you in a way. It does kind of change, like it makes that third step prayer a little more stronger, right? I mean,
oh, sure.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the things about the third step prayer that I discovered, like when I first took it and said it a whole bunch of times, I really like that part about, you know, take away my difficulties. And then I got the part that right after it where it says, so that I can show others, you know, your love, your power, your way of life. You know, and oh yeah, there's that part. You know?
And
I said that prayer a lot, where it was take away my difficulties, take away my difficulties.
Yeah.
And now it has a totally new meaning.
Yeah.
It's so I can be of service.
I heard recently that Bill W., the author of that prayer, kind of made an amend to that. Instead of relieve me or take away my difficulties, he had changed it to help me to transcend my difficulties. I don't know if it's true or not. That's what I heard.
Right.
But it makes sense, because I think that's more the heart of what it's saying, like overcome it.
Right.
Then that's a process.
Difficulties are going to come. We really just want them to disappear, but we do have to get through them. Transcend them.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So at this point now, today, and so this was some time when you accepted Christ, right?
Mm-hmm.
How have you seen, because for me, the steps in a walk of faith in service to Christ, or like, to me, the steps are the things that teach me how to be a better Christian, how to be what I would say an actual Christian, because they give me the blueprint to how to live the way that Christ told us to live, right? How have you seen those similarities, and how's that worked out for you? Have you seen those connections?
Oh, sure. And I felt like it was connected all the way. Once I got there, it was like, oh, this is where it's all been taking me.
Wow. Yeah.
Own my stuff.
Yeah.
And then, when we get a little later in the steps, it's like, forgiving others. That's just, and that thing with, I described with my dad, all of a sudden I'm looking at my dad in a different light.
Yeah.
I looked at him almost as the boogeyman before, that I had to try to seek his approval. And it never really went away, but when I saw him more of a human being and his own flaws, then it just, I'm in a walk now.
Yeah.
I'm in a faithful walk.
Yeah.
Which is what this is all supposed to be leading me to.
Yeah.
And puts me in position again to be of help of others and share with others and demonstrate, hopefully, more than tell.
Yeah. Right. Well, man, I really appreciate you, sitting in that seat of service and being so authentic and transparent about your journey and your process and what led you to this point. And I feel like there's more. We could be diving into so much more. But, we got some volunteers here that are giving their service.
No.
And I know that they got a life. But what we like to end with is just, if you have something to say to the person who may be hearing this, that's on the other end of the lens and might be considering this way of life, what would you say to that person here today?
Mm-hmm. And I've used this phrase before. Is for me, and not just then, but even more so today, is being woven into the fabric of the fellowship. And the fellowship's not just going bowling or having coffee. The fellowship is having a sponsor and working the steps. The fellowship is, is social stuff, but it's being a part, having a home group, doing service work, making coffee, whatever it is. But, it's one thing to say both feet in, but weaving yourself in it. Because I tell you what, in 30-something years, I've had some pretty long falls, and I was caught because I was woven into the fellowship. That means people were there that I trusted to let them know what was going on with me, and to catch me.
Yeah.
So it's just, the one thing I see when people are struggling is it's just they got one foot in.
Yeah.
And they got the family over here and all that stuff, and their work life, and then they pop into a meeting every now and then, or once a week or twice a week or whatever. But, for me, it's being woven in.
Yeah.
It is a part of my life.
Yeah.
And the same goes true with being like, part of a church.
Yeah.
You know, part of a congregation, and the community is there.
Yeah.
You know, when we're active in churches, we often get involved in small groups and stuff like that, and we can minister there too. I say we because my wife's been sober 26 years herself, and you know, that's the kind of thing we do. So
yeah,
but get in.
Yeah,
you know,
love it.
Weave into it.
Weave yourself in it.
Yep.
Man, appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who's listened. We just want to wrap up with thanks to the people who donate, make this thing possible. We're very happy to be serving at the local high school. Trey's serving back at the local high school. That's great. We also just started doing our 12 steps retreats, 12 and 2s. And we got this one filled up and fully sponsored, and we're working on one in March. So if anybody who's hearing this knows anyone who needs and could benefit from a pretty transformational experience, you know, it doesn't replace working the steps with a sponsor, but it's a good refresher, and it's a good way to just kind of dive into this stuff and meet some other people in recovery and weave yourself in. So thanks for listening. This has been The Most High Show.